Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tyred Boys podcast. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, for another week. We've got a lot to get into today. We had the Canadian Grand Prix. We have some IndyCar things to talk about. Only one other quick hitter for the day, but should be a fun episode. Justin, good to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see you too. Looking forward to it. Talking about the Canadian Grand Prix, a lot to get into there. Wet race, changeable conditions, lots of tire choice. So yeah, that'll be exciting to go through. Before we get into all that, let's roll the intro. Just
You're
this
not
chatbot for me.
2D.
Yeah. So
Oh.
it was fun to reach out and touch you, my friend.
Circuit of the Americas is where it's a track that was created for racing.
So the race is a flat fee, and then it's the bake off afterwards where things get really kooky.
Okay, that's where all the weirdness comes in. Mercedes definitely started planning for their new car.
If Red Bull came out and was just like, Adrian Newey designed our car.
Yeah.
Whoa, yeah, did he really?
No way.
Yep, packed episode here. Like Aaron said, we just have one quick hitter to go through. So let's hit that really quick, and then let's talk about the IndyCar races.
Yeah, so for the first quick hitter, the 24 hours of Le Mans is this weekend. So the biggest 24-hour endurance race of the year. Every year, I think it's the 80-second or 90-second running of it. It's the 90-second running of the 24 hours of Le Mans. So a bunch of different levels of racing between hypercar, GT3, and whatnot that will all be out on the circuit at the same time. We've got just a lot to look forward to. It's a packed week over the next few days with qualifying sessions, pole position, or qualifying sessions, hyperpole practice sessions, and everything before the race starts on Saturday. But it should be fun to kind of keep tabs. One of those things you can kind of pop in and out on over the weekend.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious who the diehards are that are there for every hour of the 24-hour race. I'm curious what that looks like being a fan. Like if you're going to the circuit, yeah, that's got to be quite an interesting race to try and be spectator for and feel like you've you know heard the story of the race, you know what I mean? Instead of just like, well, I saw this driver's stint for a little bit, and that was like kind of what I saw. So yeah, must be quite difficult to try and see the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely, and it just I would be interested to see what the ticket packages. Do you just have to buy a full event ticket, or can you get a Saturday night ticket or a Sunday morning ticket, or I don't know. But I mean, very, very cool race, and the endurance races are just really interesting to me overall. I'll be keeping tabs. It's just impressive the kind of consistency that you need over such a long period of time. My attention span is not that long, so I think that that many laps of the same again and again would probably wear me out quite a bit. But these guys love it, guys and girls. The Iron Dames with Dorian Penn is going to be driving there as well. I think they're in the hypercar category, and I believe she's still racing. There were some questions after she had an accident not too long ago of whether she would be racing, but one of the F1 Academy drivers that we've talked about. So
For sure, yeah. And like you said, the like attention span. Obviously, we're used to watching races that are what, like an hour and a half, maybe like, maybe a little longer. And there's also even a cap to how long they can go. But yeah, we know for the endurance races, like the drivers just have they do stints of, whatever, a couple hours, like, and I'm not sure what it is, if it's like 2 to 3 hours, if they hit, 5 to 6 hours and kind of
I
like
think it's
shuffle in.
typically like 2 to 3, and then they rotate, but you'll have multiple stints throughout the weekend.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's very, very exciting. So you said the race starts
It starts on
excuse me, on
Saturday and
Saturday.
will, yeah, carry through into Sunday. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely check it out. I'm sure if you Google it, you can figure out where you'll be able to watch. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure I can find it online. So looking forward to that this weekend. But to move on from that quick hitter into some IndyCar chit chat. At Road America this past weekend, we've got a mix of topics. We've had a couple of races since we last really got into it. There's the Detroit Grand Prix, and then there was the Expel Grand Prix at Road America. So this week in the Indy NXT series, Jamie Chadwick, who we had talked about being the first woman to podium in Indy NXT in a decade or so, became just the third woman in Indy NXT history to take pole in a race, and then she went on to win the race, being the first woman to win in Indy NXT in 15 years. So just a really impressive drive from her and a great weekend, and just wanted to highlight that before talking about some of the other IndyCar topics.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, any driver at any course to, convert the pole position into, into a W, you got to respect, you got to love it. That's quite exciting for, as maybe an exciting bit for Jamie, but also I imagine for what would you say, like indie historians, like
Yeah,
that kind of story is something you really enjoy. So yeah, that's really fun.
yeah, and us talking about this just like throughout the season and getting to hear of these highlights of both like women drivers and their successes and everything, but we've also talked about growing opportunities for countries who haven't historically had drivers in these racing series and everything at the highest level, getting opportunities and wins in Formula 2 and whatnot, growing the sport. It's these little, these are like going to be kind of the footnotes of the growth of racing for women and for everyone, kind of all around. So it's kind of it's neat to see those, and like you said, historians kind of keeping note of those events when they happen.
Yeah, because you definitely want to take the time and note them, and because it is, even though hopefully she becomes one of many, it's like great to note the first one. It is an accomplishment that is quite exciting. So yeah, cheers to her for the converted pole position. That's dope.
Yeah, and so to move on from that kind of more exciting topic to one that's a little less exciting, there's just been a lot of drama in IndyCar over the past couple of weeks between drivers. So, firstly, I'll start off with the Detroit Grand Prix because it all sort of ties together a bit. But at the Detroit Grand Prix, Santino Ferrucci, who is a very solid oval track driver, doesn't put those same kind of races together for road circuits and street circuits and whatnot, but not a bad driver. He is just a very brash personality on the IndyCar grid. He's very outspoken and to some extent aggressive. He's had a number of run-ins with Roman Grosjean throughout. They had a run-in during, I think, one of the practice sessions, and well, I believe it was one of his like team members, like garage people, was walking behind Roman while he was being interviewed, and they're like making crying motions and whatnot. Ferrucci absolutely like slammed into the side of Kyle Kirkwood during the practice session this week, and blamed it on or it might have been last week, but blamed it on Kyle Kirkwood and like physically like started an altercation with him in the paddock afterwards, like came up to him, like grabbed him and everything. And you watch the replay and he's like, you turned into me, and you watch the replay and he just absolutely like plows into the side of Kyle Kirkwood. So just ridiculous. He's doing that, and then during the race he absolutely like punted multiple people, just not rubbing his racing, just absolutely like just taking people out throughout the race. And I'm like, this guy is just a madman. Entertaining a bit, but he's just he's been some of the drama on the grid. But yeah, just some strange incidents, and it's interesting, like with IndyCar, the drivers are a bit more of a mix of like Formula One in terms of their like PR and everything, but mixed with NASCAR a little bit. So there is that like kind of roughness sometimes with the drivers, especially since they are able to kind of bump each other around without the cars taking too much damage and whatnot. I think it leans into that kind of aggression a little bit. But yeah, so Santino Ferrucci just being a madman, taking shots at everyone through the course of the season. And like I said, he's had a couple of run-ins with Grosjean, which is part of why I'm more aware of his antics.
So, couple of things for those who aren't following IndyCar, is why is Grosjean being called a crybaby, basically?
He was being interviewed, and I think he was being asked about an incident between him and Ferrucci, and whatnot, and he was just saying his side, like, I didn't feel like I did whatever, I felt like he didn't give me enough space, or yada yada yada, back and forth. But because they've had, this is probably their third or fourth like run in between practice sessions and races and all through like just this year, that it's this now like growing kind of tension between the two drivers, but also Ferrucci and the rest of the grid, because he just will run into anyone and be like, not my fault.
Sure. Yeah, I was just about to say, like, is that some type of angle shooting where, like, you're wrong, so you're, like, you're...
It didn't seem like it, because, like, when he hit Kirkwood, that was, like, during a practice session, I'm pretty sure. It wasn't even, like, so they're in the paddock after, like, it wasn't even the race. And
right,
he was
so like not for points.
Right, and he's like in his face, like trying to grab him by the overalls or the race suit or whatever. And I'm like, yo, man, you're a little out of control here. So yeah, he's been just a little bit of chaos, but that kind of one, I wanted to lead that into some other like Detroit Grand Prix things, and so
for sure.
With that, talking about him running into people, he was also not the only one who's doing that. The Detroit Grand Prix, that circuit is absolutely brutal. It's cement walls for a lot of the barriers, extremely tight hairpins. Like the track is just, and the way they set it up is purely, in my opinion, too small to have good racing. with that many cars in the field, especially with that many cars in the field. There were probably 8 different full track safeties throughout the race. There were constantly people getting like bumped off and like scraping walls and whatnot. Especially at, I think it was turn 1 is one of the like tight 90-degree like left-handers, and it's
Okay.
just no one was being able to slow down in time. People are locking up, piling into 3 cars in front of them who are slowing down to take the corner and whatnot. It was just crazy. But one of these incidents was between teammates for, or well, not teammates, but Augustin Canapino and Teo Porcher, who we've talked about coming over from F2 for Aero McLaren.
Hmm.
I said teammates, but not Canapino races for Yonkos Racing, where Porcher's with Aero McLaren, but they did have a partnership between the two teams, which is kind of what had come to mind. But Augustin Canapino had some history with some social media issues on the grid and whatnot, and so after Porcher locked up into him during the race, hit him pretty hard. I think knocked him out of the race. Porcher was receiving death threats from Canapino fans through social media, just being very like tweeting at him, direct messages, all sorts of stuff. And unfortunately, this is now kind of 3 times that this has happened with Canapino. Twice last year when Callum Ilott was his teammate. So Callum had had some issues like amongst the team with him, Canapino, and the team, which eventually led to Callum Ilott leaving the team a year early on his contract. But Canapino's fans had been sending death threats to Ilott last year on 2 separate occasions. And so now this is kind of the 3rd time. Canapino had never really addressed it, never come out. Including liking some not extremely bad posts, not death threats towards his, but like kind of negative tweets and messages towards his teammates or towards Ilott and towards Porcher.
Mm.
So just like kind of joining in with the negativity that was being thrown around. And so even Will Buxton commented on it. Canapino had put out a statement saying like, Argentinians are I'm against hate and abuse and all this stuff. People who are doing this are not my true fans. Like, you know, the whole shtick. And then he goes on saying how Argentinians are passionate. So like, but like calling Argentinians hateful or something, or like categorizing people from Argentina that way is like wrong. And so like really just going on the defensive rather than just being like supportive. He doesn't mention Porcher at all. Like he's just really like, his statement is like, I haven't actually seen any of these death threats, so I don't believe that any of those people are really part of my fans, and the majority of our fans are respectful and kind. And then he goes on like flipping it on him. He's like, I receive abuse and hate all the time, but I just live with it. Like, and just absolutely downplaying the whole situation, not really like making light of it, not really going to be like, hey, like anyone who's doing this needs to stop. He's just like, yeah, those people aren't really my fans. It's like, but dude, like you're not helping the situation by any of your statement. And Will Buxton had even kind of commented on his I guess you could call it like his statement. I wouldn't call it an apology, but Will Buxton said that he should have done this 15 months ago, the first time it happened, and until he recognizes kind of the gravity of the situation, like he needs to just kind of keep working on figuring that out, basically. That it
Sure.
won't that'll continue to happen unless he actually believes that it's an issue, which his statement didn't really show.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and like that kind of behavior would be more I don't even want to say understandable. I'll use the word like in line, or like it would make sense to come from somebody who's like a younger driver, maybe who hasn't been in these types of, I mean, effectively being on one of these teams is like it's some type of business agreement. But for somebody who is, as old as Canapino is, that is pretty, I mean, I would use the phrase like out of touch, honestly, like
Yeah,
not
when
not
you're well, yeah, like when you're 32-year old and we're talking about this stuff being hurled at a 25 and a 20-year old that like are your colleagues.
Yeah, like it. If anything, you gotta kind of like big bro that guy in the scenario and be like, whoa, 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 like we are like competitors on track. We are gonna race hard. Like
Yeah.
I give him no love on the circuit, but like, come on, stop with the hate. Like, there's no reason for this. Like you said, he's my colleague. Don't say that type of shit to him or anybody for that matter.
Right.
So
And
yeah, that's tough in my opinion.
yeah, you would really hope that the reaction it was just a very defensive reaction, like no, no, like not me. It couldn't be me involved. Like I don't support this at all. But yeah, if he had stepped up, and whether before or even now, like if he had done it now, I would almost give him a little bit more grace with the previous situations, because I'd be like, oh, he's grown. He's like grown as a person and is like doing better to support people the right way and like whatever. But yeah, so a bit disappointing to see. It then led to Arrow McLaren terminating their alliance with Yonkos Racing. So that's it kind of ends up being part of the breakup of this situation and everything, because they're like, hey, like your driver is not doing anything. This is our driver. Like we're gonna stand by him and all. So I have a lot of respect for Arrow McLaren with the way they've handled it, tweeting out a lot of support and everything for Teo Porcher as well. But then, kind of after the fact, leading into this past weekend, we had Juncos Hollinger Racing said that Canapino was not going to drive. They kind of blamed it on just like mental distractions and whatnot, I guess, from the situations. But it just was funky because he was at like press conferences and meet and greets and all throughout the week, and then just right up before the racing weekend officially started, they were like, "Oh yeah, but no, he's not gonna race." So seemed kind of reactive in terms of just like the reasoning, but who knows either way. But I think my biggest question for you, like that I had when I was thinking about it, because obviously, like this is really bad and everything. You and I have seen plenty of like hateful messages and things like that in our years of playing video games and whatnot. Like, and I don't know. Obviously, I think Canapino's like a solution, but like, what should be, or what do you feel like should be the way to handle this, maybe from like the driver who's receiving the hate and everything. Like Teo Porcher is a young kid. He's 20 years old. He's like just joining this season of IndyCar mid-season and everything. Kind of just thrust into this limelight a little bit. And it's tough. Like, I obviously, Canapino's kind of opinion is like, hey, like, people hate on me too, like, get some tougher skin. But I don't know if that's like even part of the solution. It's like it's such a tough spot for a young driver to be in who's trying to grow and just trying to worry about their on track performance. Like I can't imagine how to go about handling something like that. It's just on such a different level.
I think it has to start from. Okay, yeah. I think it has to start from the management side. So you need to understand the access that people have to your driver via the social media apps that they're going to be on. If they are, young individuals, that's part of it. That's part of being in that age bracket. But then also it's part of like branding and marketing and selling yourself. Like you need to be on those kind of social medias to make yourself known, kind of sell yourself as a product. So my belief is that the teams need to help better insulate their younger drivers, their academy drivers, their new drivers, their whatever individuals that aren't used to just the pressures of being in an organization like that. I think the last thing they need is people telling them to kill themselves on Twitter for, some bad qualifying session, or
Okay.
God forbid he rear ends somebody. Like I just don't believe that's the type of concerns that a now professional IndyCar driver at what would you say, he's 20 years
20.
old,
Yeah.
Pourchaire? Okay, yeah, there are likely much tougher things for him to worry about than like, oh, what all of these random race fans are saying online. Like the problem with social media is like, is it is a blessing and a curse. And obviously in this scenario, like it's kind of a curse where like everybody is zeroed, right? Like
Yeah.
I can at Pourchaire and like he may see it, right? So I think to help keep drivers in a competitive mindset, a team oriented mindset, I honestly don't think social media is something that is for the driver themselves. Hand it off to somebody, have them take a picture and
Okay.
just say like, say this
Yeah.
about my qualifying session, post it and forget about it. Where
Yeah.
like then he doesn't have to worry about the whatever the feedback and notifications, God forbid. So yeah, I think it is something that teams are going to have to learn how to handle, because unfortunately I'm going to lump all of us in. We driving fans that are on social media, like we treat it like we're talking to our boys, like our homies. We're like, dude, you suck. Like, bro, like you need to do so much better. And we'll use like deplorable language as though, like I said, like we're talking to like the homie. But in reality, like, no, these are professionals that do something very hard and something that should be respected. And just flippantly saying kill yourself on some social media app, like A, that's abhorrent behavior, but B, I think it's kind of a maturity thing on the drivers, and then if not a maturity thing, it's got to be parental controlled, God forbid, by the team, and say like, look, either you can't handle it, like you're gonna be talking shit on there, you're out. It's not allowed. Or if you're gonna be like looking and letting it affect your mental, like that, I'm sorry, you cannot have that.
Yeah,
it's
I
yeah, I
think
think it's got to come
that's
down to something like that.
I think that's a really good like kind of direction to go from the team standpoint and everything, because you're never going to be able to like you're never going to be able to fully control what people online say. There's always going to be people who are out there saying wild things, bad, horrible things, and whatnot, like no matter what you do. Um, so, because I think some of the things that I was seeing that I was curious about, I think you have a good concept of it with like keeping it on the team level of like just supporting and assisting their drivers by kind of taking that away or limiting that interaction so that they aren't having to see and deal with these different reactions or things that are said online. But it was interesting. I saw a lot of people that were talking about IndyCar. IndyCar, the organization, like didn't do anything. They didn't suspend Canapino. They didn't. But I don't know if it's their like responsibility, because then it's like if you are penalizing Canapino from the IndyCar organization and everything from the series based on things that a bunch of other people who, like, for all we know, maybe he has no idea or has not seen any of these people's comments or whatnot. If he's getting punished for things that aren't, like, semi outside of his control and whatnot, then that's unfair, and then you're going to run into situations where people are like utilizing that reaction from IndyCar to target drivers and try and get people like in trouble with IndyCar. I think on that side, like it's I don't know if IndyCar should have done much. I mean, they put out a statement saying like that they don't support any hate towards any drivers, personnel, teams, yada yada yada. It was just a very general PR statement, but like I guess maybe that's all that they should do. I guess in that case, any thoughts on that?
No, yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. Like, when you were saying this, I was having thoughts of like, yeah, it seems like the difference between like a federal law and a state law, like at a certain point, like what you're gonna have the governing body of IndyCar like monitoring tweets and shit, like
Yeah,
that sounds kind of below their pay grade. So yeah, it seems like something that they should have a just a firm stance that like okay, let's say it gets too far. There's like a whole bunch of, let's say Canapino crops up in 2 months with like another online, some form of like vitriol being spoken. And you get what I'm saying, where like if there's a history of it and teams are ignoring it, then maybe IndyCar steps in and says like, no,
okay,
no, we
yeah,
don't want this type of hateful individual. But yeah, for the most part, I would say it's like a state law type deal where like
yeah.
team by team basis are gonna have to deal with it differently.
Yeah, and I mean, in this instance, like I had mentioned, Juncos Hollinger, their partnership with Arrow McLaren was discontinued from the McLaren side and all, and I mean that I think things like that happening will of course push the teams to be a bit more reactive or proactive, I guess, in how they handle those situations and all. But yeah,
Sure.
just
Yeah, I agree.
a pretty unfortunate, just like shitty thing that was going on in IndyCar over the past couple of weeks. But yeah, that led us into just I'll briefly go through the highlights of this past weekend's race at Road America. But Linus Lundqvist, one of the rookies, was on pole position. I think that's his second pole of the year. He's been driving really at a high level. Unfortunately, his own teammate got into the back of him with some slipstream on the first lap and hit him, spun him out, and dropped him way back in the order. Grosjean, who we of course have followed, had a really nice drive. He was in the mix. He was making some good moves. Ends up finishing in P7, which is just a solid finish for him on the race day and everything. So he's climbing up the standings a little bit there. But yeah, a nice weekend from him. But overall, Will Power ends up winning the race. We had a Penske podium with Will Power, Alex Palou in second, and Scott Dixon in third. So a very impressive weekend from the Penske team, and it was Will Power, Joseph Newgarden, and Scott McLaughlin were the top three. Power, Palou, and Dixon are the top three in the championship at the moment. So, but yeah, a really good weekend for the Penske drivers, putting on quite the race.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to ask you about, I don't know, is this is this common to see on the first lap incident, the driver in the bright green car when he was like sitting on the grass, like before he was making any attempts to like get up out of the car, he was just sitting there doing this.
So that's the signal to the stewards. They have to jump the car. So to fire the engine, they have like a little tool that they come up to the back of the car and have to like use to refire the engine and get it going.
So that's telling them to bring the restart.
Like my car stalled. Please hurry up out here and get me back going so I can get back in the race. And so in IndyCar's case, like getting assistance like that, where for Formula One, a driver getting assistance from the stewards, you'd be out of the race. But in IndyCar, they have to restart the cars. They don't fire up the same way that F1 cars do.
Okay, gotcha. I thought that was some type of derogatory sign language that he was like, "Oh, this fucking guy, come on!" Like that's what I thought he was doing.
Like he spun me right round, baby, right round.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So that's what the signal is for. But yeah, it was. I've seen it occasionally, but that especially when I went back to like go through the replay, I saw that too, and I was like, "Oh, that's funny."
Nice. Okay, gotcha. So that is like an actual like, "Hey, fire my engine back up."
Yeah, exactly. Sweet. So
okay,
the easy
awesome.
way, instead of like radioing to the team getting a hold of like a steward or whatnot, that's just the quick little like, "Hey, come help me."
Oh, that's great. Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, next up for the episode, we have we've got a segment here. Do you work here? We've got a couple of new contracts signed, maybe some questions about some new contracts being signed. So Aaron, let's get into it.
Yeah, so the two drivers will have some staying, some probably staying, some leaving, and kind of the different effects of that with the driver with the grid. But Sergio Perez gets the 2-year extension after a pretty rough Monaco Grand Prix and everything. Not his favorite memory, I'm sure, to look back on, with his Haas sandwich that he ended up in the middle of, in the K-Mag, just aggression there at Monaco. But he gets the 2-year extension. I'm sure that the contract has some different bits and pieces and language regarding performance and whatnot, because I know Red Bull had initially offered, or it was reported Red Bull had initially offered a 1-year contract. Checo wanted 2 years. They end up going with the 2-year contract. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's language about driver performance and whatnot in there, because I was semi-surprised, especially over the past couple of races, that they made that decision at this point in the season. I felt like Yuki had been performing very well pretty consistently throughout the year so far, and so I thought that there might be an opportunity still for Yuki to move up into that Red Bull seat, but locked it down for 2 years for Checo. And then, of course, VCARB announced that they've extended Yuki's contract for 1 year, so leaving him the opportunity next year to, I guess, look again at the driver's market and all. But if I was in Yuki's position, I feel like I'd be kind of frustrated. I feel like he's performed very well. He's grown a lot as a driver. And Checo arguably is performing like not even on the level that Albon or Gasly were pretty consistently when they were dropped down to the sister team and everything, and changes were kind of made with the Red Bull lineup. Checo's had some higher highs, but I think the overall, if you look at the average across the board, it's probably around what they dropped Gasly and Albon for.
Interesting. Well, the angle that I thought of is like, okay, other than Carlos Sainz, I think the driver market looks pretty dry and sparse for Red Bull. I think if you're Red Bull, Sainz didn't work out with Max before. Maybe they didn't see any reason to like try him again. So kind of like based on the driver market, if you don't want to go with somebody super young, super untested, you're not that high on Yuki. Daniel hasn't really impressed yet. I mean, like, what else are you gonna do? Like, I think it's fine.
I don't think it's the worst decision. I mean, right. They've won multiple constructors championships with Checo next to Max there. They're leading the constructors championship again. So I mean, I don't think it's a bad option. I think I was just a little surprised that it didn't at least take more time for them to look at Yuki and where he's at, because so far, in my opinion, he's been probably next to Max, probably the best performing driver of the three of them, of Yuki, Checo, and Ricciardo. Yuki's consistently beat Danny in qualifying and races. He's been putting the car up in the points and like in fighting in the top 10 pretty consistently. I wouldn't be surprised. I'd have to look at the head-to-head. I wouldn't be surprised if Yuki in the VCARB has a like close to 50% qualifying head-to-head versus Checo in a much worse car. So I thought at least that it was going to go till like the summer break before they start making all the decisions with everything. Especially at this point when, like you said, the driver's market's kind of dried up a bit and it didn't look like Sainz was an option anymore. I just felt like there was going to be a little more kind of like, hey, these are the guys that we have here. Let's let them play for it a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. So your angle is thinking like Red Bull is looking to like, shake things up, get somebody fresh in that position. Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
And just Checo he's getting older as a driver too. Like I said, I think he's performed solidly enough. Like
yeah, he's fine.
He's fine. But and there wasn't necessarily someone who's currently better that I saw them slotting in. but I feel like Yuki is much younger, has a lot of potential growth and everything that he could bring. So that was kind of my. I was just. Even if they had gone till later in the season, summer break, even after, and then had decided this, I think I would be more okay with it because they would have kind of really like looked at the options a bit more thoroughly. This seems just a bit of a jump this early, but maybe it's because of other teams trying to lock in contracts and whatnot, or Yuki talking to this team or that team, people talking to Checo, and they're like, okay, we gotta solidify things. Maybe that's the case, but I would have liked to see Yuki have the opportunity to kind of gun for it a little bit more.
Oh yeah, you okay? All right, gotcha. You wanted like a little bit of a tease, that'd be like a little bit of a chase, that
Or
kind
just
of
like
deal.
that it wasn't
Bit of
decided,
mystery.
because I mean the whole point of
Who
VCarb is
knows?
to the whole point of VCarb is for them to develop drive similar to like Haas and Williams to Mercedes or Ferrari, that these drivers
Hmm.
start there and grow. Like same kind of concept with Yuki, and I feel like he's grown a lot, which is I feel like why having giving him or him being in the conversation for longer would have made sense.
All right, here's my armchair psychologist view. I don't think they're developing Yuki to put onto the main team. I think they're looking to sell Yuki. I don't think Yuki and Max will get along. He's not a second driver, I don't believe. I think he's the type of driver, like, based on what I've heard from him on the team radio and how he interacts with the um basically like the production staff. This guy is not playing second fiddle. He's not like letting Max go by because he's on like a different strategy. I think he's going to say a lot of F words on the radio if that's like the expected behavior from him. I bet if I had to put my money somewhere, I bet Yuki is not supposed to be on Red Bull. I think he's getting sold to another team. I bet he's like a bargaining chip in some way.
Okay.
I doubt him and Max get along well together.
Yeah, I mean I could see that. It might be a lot to have two people coming onto the team radio and yelling at their pit wall and cursing up a storm because Max does that. I mean, Max isn't overly, he's not quite as explosive as Yuki, but he definitely has his fair share of swearing and whatnot in those conversations. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's the case, but at the same time, like, in my mind, you're putting this money, this time, this effort into growing Yuki as a driver. Like, if you only extended him for 1 year, at the end of next year, he can just leave and take all of that knowledge, all of that experience, and everything that you have given to him, and he owes you nothing. So I
Yeah.
feel like that is the only caveat with that, but that could be the case that or maybe they thought he had the potential to be that Red Bull guy, and now they're like, we don't think he is, but he's solid here in the V carb, and we'll hang on to him if we can. So that might be the case as well. But then to move on, as we're kind of solidifying these lineups to the other V carb seat, there were reports that it sounds like Daniel Ricciardo is expected to stay as the driver for next year as well and get the extension. Nothing official yet, but that's the conversation. And so now that kind of throws some other things up in the air. There were reports last year when Lawson had come in to drive for Daniel Ricciardo when he had broken his wrist that There were contract things about Lawson getting a drive for one of the teams in 2025. If not, exit clauses, yada, yada, yada. So now we have a lot fewer seats to solidify, one of which being Esteban Ocon leaving Alpine. I think there are still doors potentially open into a Formula One seat for Liam Lawson, but I don't know how likely it would be for a team like Alpine to take a shot at that. I don't know. I think we've obviously seen that Lawson can put in solid drives. Ocon's leaving, but Alpine does have Jack Doohan in their junior academy, who's performing well. And so I think he's the odds-on favorite, but if Lawson is released from whatever contract he has with Red Bull, I'd be curious if that opens the door for him to be picked up by another team potentially. I mean, we saw Nick DeVries get his opportunity driving, and he was driving, I believe, the Aston Martin when he got his substitute position the year before VCarb or AlphaTauri took him on. I can't remember, but he wasn't filling in the AlphaTauri seat the year that he substituted in, and then they picked him up as a driver and everything into that seat. So obviously that didn't end super well, but I think that, in my mind, leaves the opportunity there for someone from like Liam Lawson, who got to prove himself a bit, who's in the Red Bull organization, potentially having that room to move outside.
Wasn't Liam Lawson after DTM with Albon? Didn't he go and drive Super Formula in Japan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been.
Right.
That's where he's been driving. As far as I remember,
slots like that to me feel like my man's just having a different career. You know what I mean? I'm curious how long as a driver you kind of like leave that shoulder open. How will it? Basically, my question is, if you've got a good gig going, how willing are drivers to just kind of like drop this contract and just go start an F1? Is it always like the bigger, better deal? Like, basically, like the deeper question is like, what does F1 bring him that Super Formula doesn't?
Money. So
Okay.
the lower racing series are still relative, like even being sponsored and everything in like, I think up through even like F3 and maybe F2 if you're not in like a junior academy for one of the Formula One teams. I think you primarily cover most of your own expenses for travel, for like, it's still like kind of a weird system where you're having to pay or have sponsorship people and everything pay for you to be able to be there for your drive and everything. And so Super Formula, I think being in the Red Bull organization and everything, I'm sure he makes somewhat of a salary, but probably not anything crazy. And I think F1 would be like you made it, like here's your big paycheck and your drive in the series and everything.
Okay.
So I'm sure he doesn't like dislike driving in the Super Formula and everything, but I would imagine that it's not as optimal. And DeVries had substituted for Williams in the 2022 Italian Grand Prix. I couldn't remember.
I fucking knew it. That's what I was thinking the whole time. I just didn't want to say it and be done.
Oh, no, that would have been fine. I couldn't remember, and I was like, well, Hulkenberg substituted in for Aston Martin back during COVID, and I like just couldn't place where DeVries had filled in for. But yeah, Williams. So
Okay, gotcha. But yeah, so Daniel Ricciardo rumored to be sticking around in the RB camp. But yeah, dude, fucking fireworks out of the Alpine camp where Ocon's like, dude, I'm out of here.
well, it sounded like from the it was Ocon had put out his statement after I saw his statement after I had seen it all over that they were severing their ties at the end of the season. Makes you wonder which side was the catalyst on that, but I know Ocon definitely was like, yeah, I'm like, this is a mutual decision, and I am looking forward to the future opportunities doing whatever else. I'm interested to see where he goes. I don't think there's a spot for him in Formula One next year. So I just don't think any of the seats like make sense for him.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only seats that are still unconfirmed, we've got Ricardo's seat, Sargent's seat, Lance Stroll's seat,
Yes, ever contended.
Valtteri's seat with Kick Sauber, and then the two Haas seats as well. So
Mm.
I mean, there's still a few opportunities, but between Aston Martin's seat not being available, Williams, Haas, or Kick Sauber, I just feel like Ocon would not really be the choice among any of those three teams.
Yeah, probably not, but I heard that Levi's has like a long jean line, like a long-legged jean line coming out, so he may just be able to get in line as like a modeling gig for that. I
All right.
mean, Ocon's leg modeling game would be so strong, so I
The
so I really hope
straight
Levi's
he
picks him
has
up.
he has those like the perfect straight, like his jeans are like when if I drew a picture of someone, that's
Yes.
how the jeans would look. They're like perfectly straight on the
Hmm.
legs and everything. There's, it would look like yeah my cartoon drawing there,
I think
which
my
maybe
man
is what
should
they're looking
get
for.
they may be looking for that. He could get a job as a like a residency as Jack Skellington with those long legs. He could do that. I mean, I just think if it's not Formula One, he's got talents. He's got
He
things going
he
for him.
does, and he's not a bad driver either. But this Alpine lineup, the clashing is just not working, and
No.
has not been phenomenal over the past couple of seasons. So
But that was
I
my note for Alpine for the Canadian Grand Prix is like, is this just dead team vibes where like now all of a sudden we can kind of like race near each other without bumping? Oh shit, we can actually both get points? Like that's crazy too.
Yeah, but even then we had, and we'll get to that. We had some tension in the post race radio and everything. So even
Oh, of
when that
course.
happens, you can't. Uh, no one can, or not everyone can be happy, even if that's the case. But yeah, with him leaving Alpine, like we said, Jack Doohan sounds like the most likely person to slot in, but there might be some options out there. And then of course Williams at this point, they've pretty much all but announced Logan Sargent not being extended for another year. They've talked about, they've just kind of blatantly talking about their other the drivers they have their eye on for potential drives and whatnot. Valtteri, of which is one option that's being looked at pretty heavily from what I see. I don't know if Williams would replace him mid-season, but we'll talk about his race from this past weekend very shortly. Before we do that, though, just remember, if you're here listening with us, we'd really appreciate it if you like, subscribe, follow, chat with us, join the Discord, all the different things. We're looking to have 100 subscribers by the end of the year. And we really appreciate everyone for spending time listening to us jabber on. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening and enjoying the show. Now let's talk about the Grand Prix.
Yeah, so talking about the Grand Prix, we can start off with the winners and losers of the week. I'm gonna just roll right into my losers from this week because one of those two losers for me was Logan Sargent. I've really been pulling for him to at least like, even if he wasn't gonna keep the seat with Williams and everything, wasn't doing what they need and all. I was really hoping that he could at least have some solid drives to like hang his hat on at the end and be like, hey, I left it all out there on the track. And when I say left it all out there, I don't mean bits of carbon fiber from hitting the wall with the nose of your car and then getting going and then crashing out again in the same race. I was bummed. Like I really, Logan he seems like a great guy from everything I've seen outside of the circuit. And yeah, I've been kind of pulling for him to just put in decent performances. Like maybe get a point like somewhere across the year. The Williams is it's gonna be rare for points for them anyway, but like to have just like one of those drives where it all clicks for him. But yeah, unfortunately, another just rough weekend for Logan.
Well, just on Sunday, I mean, like his Saturday was literally the best Saturday that he has ever
Yeah,
had. His Q2 berth, I mean, he's going to bed Saturday over the moon, and then on Sunday,
the rain
his
falls and
his safety cars just continue to decide races now. Like
yeah,
that's what we can count on is like Logan spinning and then changing the winner.
yeah. I mean, people could say, or people did say the same about Latifi back in the day. Maybe it's a Williams thing. Maybe it's
Dude,
not them at all. Maybe it's that second Williams seat is just,
cursed.
yeah, that might
That's
be,
what we'll say. It's just cursed from now on.
yeah. Logan, or the second Williams seat is cursed. We'll have to see how that shakes out over the upcoming season. See if anyone can break that curse. But yeah, one of my losers being Logan. The other one, Ferrari. After the high highs of Monaco, Charles Leclerc victory and everything, we come into this race and we have the double DNF, engine issues, risky strategy calls as kind of a Hail Mary, just all the things. And really, it was. I was thinking, I'm like, I talked about, oh, Red Bull is one like double DNF from losing the lead. I didn't think of the other side of it where the double DNF from Ferrari could lose them a lot of points in that gap. But even in this case, it wasn't as big of a detriment for Ferrari when it comes to the constructors' fight against Red Bull because Checo DNF'd as well. But really, the biggest loss for them, in my opinion, this weekend is the amount of points that McLaren and Mercedes were able to make up on the weekend, having both of their drivers for both teams finish very well. Lando second, Piastri fifth, and then George and Lewis in 3-4. I mean, that's 28 points for both of those teams, with Lewis picking up the fastest lap, that they have now climbed closer to Ferrari in the constructors' standings. So that's a big jump. A big jump for Lando, who's now only 7 points back from Leclerc for second in the driver's standings. So that really was, after thinking about it, kind of where that biggest loss I feel like is for Ferrari on the weekend.
Yeah, it's not about them like looking ahead. They actually now have to start they actually now have to kind of start looking over their shoulder in that regard, and these teams are, getting pretty close to them. Yeah, Ferrari was my loser, or one of my losers as well. I think you nailed it. Like, it does make me it does make me appreciate races in the wet, because often it feels like everybody's like always looking forward to it or something, where they're always just like, oh yeah, this is like, what we live for, this is how we can, gain ground or whatever. But this was an example. Hold on.
Some troublesome kitty cats over there.
Don't even get me started, brother. um
But you're talking about Ferrari as one of your losers as well, and looking forward to rainy weekends in terms of teams who are maybe finishing higher than they typically would because of the chaos.
Yeah, and like it just makes me kind of appreciate, like, okay, no, like this is very, very difficult, and if you are a driver that's touted for driving in the wet or having skill in the wet, like they're probably not just telling a story. Like, we
Yeah.
saw it get the better of Sainz, we saw it get the better of Perez. We
I
saw
mean,
a
we
bunch of
saw it.
drivers going off.
Yeah, we saw it with
Alonso,
Russell. We saw it with Verstappen too. Verstappen was
Lando.
right behind George Russell, and or yeah, I think he was right behind, or no, he was right behind Lando, and then lost like 5 seconds and dropped back to have to fight George by going off in one of the turns. Like, yeah, it's
Right.
having that skill is I think a hard thing to appreciate, but the drivers who are good at it are really good.
Well, because it's clear, like, you just pay for it out the nose, right? Like, science, tiny, tiny error. Even like, let's talk about Logan. Like, even his was a tiny, tiny error. It's literally the difference of, like, just trying to get onto the power just a little too early. Like, his tire was just still on the curb, and like, he's
Or
he's
yeah,
spinning, he's done, right?
hitting a little baby
So
puddle of water, like yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So to a certain degree, like, it can happen to anybody, but the other side of that is, like, these unforced errors were, in my opinion, kind of the story of the weekend, of the race. Like, I think a lot of it came down to drivers gaining and losing advantages on their own merit, like less to do with like a Logan safety car or whatever.
yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at it as well. It's not that it causes chaos, but it levels the playing field in terms of which cars are faster to some extent. Like the Red Bull rocket ship can't be a rocket ship as much in the wet, so it's like leveling that out. I mean, we even saw on the weekend that the Mercedes had the fastest overall, like genuine pace. Whether they were
Hmm.
able to make that work out, not as well as they would have hoped, I think. But I mean, it does shift things around quite a bit. And of course, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari are all bringing upgrades and updates and everything as well. But yeah, I think the wet really does bring out a different side of the racing.
Hmm. So yeah, I was basically like wanting to agree with you about, I think one of the biggest losers on the weekend definitely was Ferrari, but also just kind of devil's advocating, like, that seemed like a really tough race, like
Yeah,
a really tough race.
definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm with you. It still stings stings um, for the Ferrari team to lose out on that opportunity big time.
Hmm.
But what was your other loser on the weekend?
Just I had Yuki. Honestly, I thought his qualifying was so solid, and then his race pace was honestly pretty good. But again, like he just put his tire out of line, and he goes across the little grass thing, ends up spinning. He's sideways on the track. But like that type of mistake happened to pretty much everybody. It just kind of cost him a little bit more.
Yeah.
So my loser wasn't like so imperative or whatever. It was just kind of somebody that was clearly having a good weekend and just a wet track, kind of unforced error, drops him out of the point. So I thought that was kind of unfortunate for Yuki, but like whatever, not like the worst thing. On the winner's side of it though, like literally every angle that I could come up with for a winner, there was like some large counterpoint that was like, yeah, but this. And even like the one winner that I wanted to talk about. So like, all right, Lewis Hamilton, like a pretty decent race, like you even listen to the Mercedes guys and they're like, yeah, our weekend's actually dog shit. Like we suck, we hate the car, like whatever. So it's like, all right, like even you guys don't think it was good. Like what kind of takeaways are we supposed to have from a race like this? So that's where I'm at for the winners.
Yeah, I can understand that. And yeah, everything does have its little bits and pieces. I mean, for me, it was kind of the counterpoint to Ferrari's double DNF was McLaren getting to creep ever closer into that fight for second in the constructors and for Lando in the drivers championship. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but even in that case, this could have easily been a Lando win, and he ends up in P2 with the safety car and everything, helping out Max this time as opposed to helping out Lando. So that was definitely kind of the counterpoint, and then of course Alpine with their own team drama. I was like, hey, double points, like that should be exciting. But again, Ocon being upset about the team orders to let Gasly through to try and chase down Daniel Ricciardo, and then not swapping the place back, and all this like inter team tension. Yeah, there are kind of some negatives. Without just blatantly being like, "Well, my winner this week is Max Verstappen because he finished P1." Like,
Well, like that was my thing too. Like that would have been like the really easy one. Like, okay, he
right?
didn't start in first and he ends in first. That's pretty cool. But yeah, like I was not going to have that be my winner. But yeah, like that was even going to be my thing for like counterpoint for McLaren. It's like, yeah, they like improve their position, they get a lot of points, they, close in on Ferrari, but like I mean, I would like. I was even saying it in the Discord. I was like, dude, this is just a free pit stop. And
Oh
then
yeah,
instead of going for the one lap, they went for the two. And it seems like a call where they weren't sure that they had the gap. So okay, do another lap at that pace. We'll get the gap that we need, and we'll be fine. Like you can see the idea working, but clearly they kind of overcook it a little bit in that regard and maybe overthought it a little too much.
I think if they had the foresight to say, "Hey, Lando, like we need you to like all out like push for 2 laps." If they had said that from the beginning, instead of, it seemed like the George and
One
Max
and one.
pitted, and then they were like, oh, he just kept going, and then he comes around, and they're like, we still don't have that gap. Okay, like put pedal to the floor, like really, really send it this time. Maybe if they were like, we won't have the gap with one more lap like this, but hey, if we put 2 push laps if Lando thinks the tires can hold up to that, then hey, maybe. Or do that really hard push lap immediately, and then maybe they would have had the gap after one lap. But yeah, just didn't quite pan out in that instance. But it was exciting. That was fun
Oh
waiting
yeah,
to
for
see.
sure. Yeah, for sure. And that was gonna be like the other kind of bigger angle is as far as like for fans, like I think we're the ones who really win in the sense of like it was parity almost to the end, like especially with like George and Lewis racing till the end. The McLarens were in there, they had some good pace. So yeah, I think like even if you can't pick, one team or one driver or one scenario, I mean, yeah, because obviously it seems like a bunch of teams, a bunch of drivers had things go wrong, and like not everybody had a perfect weekend. So in that, I think like that's actually pretty exciting. Where this track like brought some true jeopardy, some true problem solving, and to my mind, it was actually like a very exciting race to watch. Just there's no, and I think this is actually like more interesting than anything. There's no easy answers to kind of slot into this like framework of conversation that we have because it was so up in the air and teams like came in with this plan on, oh, we got to pivot. Like you could clearly see that the rain was imperfect information. Some teams were operating that it's going to start raining in 2 laps. Other teams at the same time thought like, okay, we actually have 5 laps in this scenario here. So I think a lot in terms of the tire strategies. Obviously, we saw Ferrari, throw on the hards with Charles once like things weren't going so hot for him. They were like, oh, like if it dries up here, like we're gonna be on the perfect tire at the right time. We saw that gamble. Obviously, reminiscent of Seb Vettel in that regard. But yeah, I think we as the viewers and the fans like really get to win with a race like this.
There's our real winner
Oh
for
yeah,
the
dude.
week. So no, I think that I was gonna ask you later on like what your opinion was overall on the race, and I mean across the weekend it was really like a classic kind of race. I mean we have pole position being a tie with Max setting the time second and everything
Mm-hmm.
for George to take that. Only the second time that that's happened in Formula One for pole position since they started going to 3 decimal places for the timing and everything. So pretty incredible in terms of that that we had that happen to see how tight the competition was on the weekend. But yeah, leading into just a really kind of crazy but also fun race. I mean, we saw Albon get past Daniel Ricciardo and Esteban Ocon in the same pass, which was probably one of the best passes of the season so far. When he kind of split through them at that the little chicane, just looked like a great drive from him up until the unfortunate bug came to bite him as well, with just being wrong place, wrong time, and getting knocked out. A bummer for him. Checo, similar, like you said, small mistakes becoming bigger problems for the drivers. But I think my other like biggest thing of note was I found it really interesting and exciting at the beginning of the race with the Haas drivers both being on the full wet tires.
Mm.
I was like hoping that they had a larger strategy planned out with the wet tires involved, and I mean the biggest component of that being like a planned and precise pit stop would have been nice for K Mag, even if he had to pit off the wet tires onto the inters and everything as early as he did. I think it was like lap 7, lap 8.
Mm-hmm.
If they had had a good clean pit stop, he would have still been in the points probably. and instead he's right back to where he started in P like 13 or 14, and just kind of out of the out of the points immediately. Yeah, started P14, and I think that's where he had dropped to after the like 9-second pit stop they gave him when they're running out with his tires from the garage. He came on the radio. He's like, "Why did we come in if you weren't ready?" And his pit wall's like, "They were supposed to be ready. They knew this was happening. I don't know what happened," kind of thing. But I mean, before that, Magnussen and Hulkenberg to some extent were flying through the field.
Yeah. And to your point about wondering about a more specific like pit window, it was, I mean, awkward timing if we've ever had it, where he stopped being quicker than everybody right on the crossover window for the inters, where then like the inters are quicker, okay, but if he pits to get off of them, then well, he's kind of like missed it. And then the overall narrative was also like, we're within 5 minutes of a drying track, so like they at a certain point they stopped caring about the wet to inter crossover, and they were just like, well, we're trying to now push until we can just go on to slicks with everybody else. So I think that was the awkward thing that they ran into. If we got, I'm going to be really imprecise here, but let's say we got 10 more minutes of like racing in the rain, I think that I think that wet tire carries more weight further into the race, and he actually gets to retain more of those positions.
Yeah,
that's my sense of that strategy.
I would tend to agree. I think that it could have panned out like just a lot better for them.
Yeah, for sure.
With like if they had executed on the pit stop, like if he's in P10 on new inters, and then we have a safety car or something, and people start pitting, or the pit window for everyone else's inters start coming up, he doesn't have to pit, and the longer he can stay out on that first set of inters for him, the more opportunity to climb up from safety cars and things. Like, I think it could have been the right call and just bad execution. I think that could have worked out really well. The other thing that I was really curious, because we did see the tracks start to dry up so quickly, and Canada's so weird because they're showing on the graphics that certain sections of the track were like dry, like they were showing like dry and then inter, and I was really hoping when the inters were starting to go and they're like, oh yeah, but there's rain in like 20 minutes, guys. I wanted someone to be like, bang, I'm putting on the softs, going and just powering through some laps on the soft tires. 20 minutes, I mean, that's about, I don't know, 14 laps or so that they would have had before the rain was coming. Like, that's about the stint. I don't know if it would have been faster. I wanted to see it. I was like watching so intently, like, is someone gonna do it? I just wanted to see what would have happened, and it very easily could have been someone hitting a puddle off the racing line and spinning out on the slick tires. But I was itching to see someone go for that home run kind of play.
Unfortunately, as exciting as something like that is, the time you gain is likely the cost of the 2 pit stops.
Yeah, which is where I'd be curious, because I mean, if it was significantly fast, I mean, the inters are typically going to be at least like 1.5 to 2 seconds slower than the slicks if it's in that that range that slicks could even be used.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it would have been tight, but I was just really curious, like if it would pan out.
Oh
But
yeah.
obviously, from the team's side, they're like, we don't know if it would pan out even, so why go for the risky move? Which I get, but I was hoping.
Yeah, dude, F1 teams are like so risk averse.
Oh,
There's
absolutely.
like never the 40-60 play. Like they just don't go for those. They just save their
It's
guns and go
Yeah,
next.
I mean it's too detrimental financially if it goes poorly. Like it's
Right.
a bit different than like a 50-50 in League of Legends or video games or whatever, where it's like okay, or even like sim racing or esports, where like if you make that decision and it doesn't pan out or whatever, then it's like okay, where in Formula One, if it doesn't pan out, it could be like $1 million of damage to a car. So,
Right.
so I mean, it makes sense why, but I still wanted to see it so bad.
Dude, I just find those like differences of mind very funny. Like you clearly like know and operate with the one piece of information, but your viewer mind is still like, dude, show me those soft tires, baby.
Oh
But
yeah,
but you know in the back of your mind like that is never happening.
no, a hundred
Yeah.
percent. I was like, is it? Could it dry out a little bit more? But no, we still had I mean still a very fun race to watch even without my curiosity being brought to life. But yeah, I mean you had mentioned it earlier, just to talk about Mercedes a little bit. I was similarly surprised with both of their reactions. I think George's reaction was a bit more regarding just the mistakes he made and whatnot, and how it cost him. But with Lewis, I mean, I was kind of surprised. Like I felt like he had a pretty solid race overall. I mean, he started P7, he gets his way up to P4. It's a crazy day. Like there's like tires are falling off or coming back and everything. You have good pace in the car compared to like what you have had versus your competitors and everything across the season so far. I'm like, in my mind, that's like there are so many more positives than negatives. But this being Lewis's Lewis surpassing Jenson Button for the longest F1 career for a British driver at this race, 17 years, 2 months, and 22 days, beating out Jenson Button's by 6 days at that point. Like,
Nice.
and then Lewis goes, one of the worst drives I've ever had. Across 17 years, 2 months, and 22 days, he's like, this one was one of the worst. And it really just didn't seem like it in like looking from an outside perspective.
Dude, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I honestly lose it when the interviewers ask questions like, "Oh, but like you had like some battles. Like, isn't that fun?" And Lewis is like, "Nah, dude. Like, if I'm not winning, I don't give a fuck. I do
Winning
not
is
care."
fun.
Yeah, like winning is fun, and that is it. Everything else is the worst drive I've ever done.
Yeah, but I was like, I was surprised because I thought again like 28 points, like huge swing to try. I mean, they're still
I mean, that's a bite
significantly
out of
back.
Ferrari.
It is. They're still a ways back
Sure.
from the start of the season, but we still have a lot of season ahead of us. I mean, we've got. I still think like 14 races or something like that on the
That
schedule
was
ahead. So
This
that
was
10?
round 9. No, so we have 15 races. We're not even halfway through yet.
No, this was 10. Or no, you're right. The schedule has the preseason testing on it. So yeah, it was round 9. We have 15 races to go. Like that gap can be reeled in and all. So I thought I think maybe from the fan perspective, great day for Mercedes. But I guess internally and maybe the difficulty of the drive and everything was not as exciting for them.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense too. Like you're in the cockpit view of a race is it's just so much more narrow than what we have and are seeing and like how the viewers think about the race. Like it's obviously totally different. So like, you can understand that. But yeah, I think solid weekend overall, not just the Sunday, like you said, solid weekend. The qualifying was really exciting. So yeah, we had Max Verstappen, W, Lando Norris, P2, and then George Russell, P3 there for the 2024 Canadian Grand Prix. Yeah, I might agree with you. I think it was a classic.
Yeah, I was. It's one that I think in 5 to 10 years, like people will 100% look back at, and it will be one of those highlighted like YouTube video race replays that pops up and everything of like the chaos of the 2024 Canadian Grand Prix. Just a couple of quick McLaren shout outs here, deviating, but we've got a long list of drivers who've scored points in every race this year with Lando Norris. So big list there, and really congrats to him. He's had a super strong and consistent season so far. He's stayed out of trouble, and he's in third in the driver's standings, 7 points back from Leclerc. So big shout out to him, and also I forget if I mentioned it earlier, but the 2 McLaren drivers are the only drivers who have completed every lap of the season up until this point so far. So
let's go.
Yeah, just two solid points. The performance and consistency both from the McLaren drivers as well as the team and the car they've put together, not having these failures or anything up until this point is just big props to their team. They're having a nice year.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And yeah, since Lando's win, definitely looking forward to more from the team.
Yeah, I mean they're in the fight. I think that will be just as exciting of something to keep an eye on for that P2 in the constructors, and of course with them both being that close to potentially climbing up to fight Red Bull a bit more across the season. Got a fun year ahead. I'm looking forward to it. But any other final notes here with the Canadian Grand Prix?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. That was all the kind of important bits. The one thing I didn't say, this will make me laugh out loud every single time, is seeing drivers go straight on, like through a chicane or a turn, where the brain does wild things. Like the lines painted on the track, it actually does so much to like make you believe like, oh, there's like limitations. They cannot go there. So
like it's gonna mess up the car. It's gonna be bad news bears. They're gonna get beached in the gravel. Like,
dude. So I like guaranteed every time I laugh out loud when I just see like Alonso or whoever just like just like through the chicane. It just makes me laugh, and I don't know why. And this was a race where like it happened a lot. So
it happened quite a few times, and they like to show it on the broadcast too. I also found it very funny every time it happened. Like there was someone, I think Sainz did it to Logan, and like everyone's like on their own team radio being like, hey, they rejoined unsafely. It's like, come on guys, like you know what happened. Like you did it 2 laps ago, my guy. So yeah, that is pretty funny and I like your little noise. So that
Well, like dude,
oh,
it's just the most comical thing
that's
ever.
a
Yeah.
great like cartoonish like onomatopoeia for that happening and everything. So
Onomatopoeia. Hell yeah. Okay.
yeah, so yeah, bringing back vocab from elementary school, but why don't
Schoolhouse
we
Rock. There it is again.
slide here into the cool down lap? Why don't you hit us with your flavor of the week for the week?
All right, dude. So I'm gonna start with just the deepest cut you've ever heard. All right. So this is my music. I was listening to Ultralight Beams, the
Okay.
intro song on The Life of Pablo, on Chance's verse towards the
Okay.
end of the song. He has a line where he says, I bet my ex looking back like a pillar of salt. In just like in the line, he's basically just saying like I'm successful now to a degree. I bet if my ex, somebody who he used to date, would look back at our time together, they would be like really angry because I missed out on being able to be with the now like Chance the Rapper.
Yeah.
And every time I've heard that song, that's how I've heard that line. I recently came upon some like biblical
Mm-hmm.
stories, right? There's
Yep.
a story in the
Sodom and
Bible.
Gomorrah.
Okay,
Yep.
yes. Right. So in this story, I believe it is a test of the individual's faith in God where he must or I should say they must keep moving forward away from I believe it's like a loved individual eh, having faith that God will like keep them there or keep them alive or whatever. But the individual does not have faith and he turns around and they like crumble into salt.
Mm-hmm.
Bro. So when I heard this song now like the other day and just you just hear the line, it hit me like a train. I was like, "No fucking way."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so not as much looking back and being mad, but like uh you like put your eyes, your goals in one direction and it's away from this thing behind you. Like that's in the past, but then in the story in the Bible, yeah, it's like a few of them like turn around to see what's going on with the city and everything, and are like they're like no, like God said not to do that. So he said keep looking forward, and you're glancing back at your past. So yeah, being like, oh, I bet my ex is looking at me. It's still similar meaning and everything, but then my ex is looking back at me instead of moving forward with their life, being like, oh, that could have been. So not as much mad maybe, but yeah, I think it's a cool like um uh just bar. Yeah,
Well, the double entendre
that's what
is
I was looking for. I
so
couldn't.
strong in that regard. And I've heard that song so many times, but it's like with this new bit of information, like you realize like, oh damn, like that's actually like a reference. Like
I love
so
getting that
sick.
from when there's so many songs that I've gone back to after I've learned more and gotten older and whatnot, where I'm like, oh wait, that was that's cool.
Hit me like a bag of bricks. It was amazing. My visual medium that I've been checking out recently, an old show with Kiefer Sutherland, 24. My man
Okay.
Jack Bauer saving the world day after day. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but each episode is just like 1 hour of a full day. So there's 24 episodes in a season. So
Okay.
like, bro, it's so good.
I have not. I've heard of the show. I have not ever watched any of it. So
Sure. The format is like really exciting in the sense of like I don't think there's other shows that like kind of do it in that regard. And the writing is like really really solid. It was one of my mom's like favorite TV shows, kind of like when I was growing up. That's like when the
Okay.
seasons were coming out. So who knows? But I've been going back and watching that. And then my food here, I was recently a part of a research and development study. So I was going out and testing different sandwiches at a bunch of different locations. So
Oh,
I've been
that's cool.
I'm effectively an Italian hoagie expert at this point. So
Oh
whatever you
yeah.
need to know, dog.
I love it. That's
Yeah,
awesome. How many different places did they have you going to and like comparing?
four.
For? Okay. Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was
And
solid.
kind of a cool way to get to try out some local spots and everything too. Um, I have to like keep a
Yeah.
list of restaurants that I see that I'm like, oh, I should try that sometime, so that when Colleen and I are like, oh, let's pick up from somewhere, we don't just go to Chipotle again. Like, so I think that's a cool way to get to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was great. But that's my flavor of the week here, sir. What is yours?
So I'll start with my music. So Colleen had me listen to Chapel Roan, who is a new emerging artist. Are you aware of her at all?
Negative.
Okay,
Negative.
so she was, I guess, brought along on Olivia Rodrigo's most recent tour. Do you know Olivia Rodrigo? This was going to be my little pop quiz.
By name, not by like music.
Okay, gotcha. How about Taylor Swift? No.
Big fan.
Yeah, no, I had a feeling you would know Taylor, but I was when I was thinking about it and like how she came up, I was like, I wonder if Justin's like aware of much with Olivia Rodrigo or anything there. I had a feeling that would be the case, but she has a very like great voice, similar style to like a mix of yeah, that like Olivia Rodrigo, which is that poppy but like kind of younger perspective of like being out in the world and dating and this and that and all, but with like some really well written songs, like a great voice. It reminded me of Taylor Swift first hearing it, like just really like solid vocalist and everything. Um, but yeah, enjoyed listening to that a little bit. It's not my typical style of music, but I like when Colleen kind of broadens my horizons a little bit. So may not be something that I go to that often, but a song here or there may end up in the playlist. But for my food this week, Colleen and I got a grill recently, which we're just pumped about. I've been grilling up a storm over the past week or so. I've been cooking up hot dogs, burgers, steak, just corn cobs,
Nice.
kebabs, just all of the anything you can throw on a grill. I'm like, let's do it. So I've just been enjoying that. We've had good weather and everything, so standing outside cooking in the evening hasn't been too bad. And then my visual medium this week, we just finished Dune 2 last night.
Hell
And
yeah.
after watching the first one and all, watching the second one was great. I enjoyed the movie a lot. You were kind of left at the end of the first movie. I felt like just like there was so much world building in the first movie that I was like waiting for more of the what was to come and everything and what all had been teased. There was a good bit of action in the first movie. It was good too, but the second movie, Dune 2, was I enjoyed it a lot and felt like they did a nice job of carrying the storylines and everything through. So yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Hell yeah. There are scenes from movies that like live in my brain where like just randomly they'll just like pop into my head, right? And the scene from the first Dune where the young main character
Timothy
is
Chalamet.
yeah, where he's in the bedroom with I guess it's like his general and there's like the rays of light and there's like the little like spy drone coming
Oh yeah,
into the bedroom. The lighting in that shot is like it's insane. It
yeah.
is like it truly blows my mind.
They are extremely like well made cinematic pieces. Like the visuals are so just wild. Like the sand, all the different ways that they utilize that for sandstorm, smoke screen, like whatever you want to call it. In the fighting scenes and everything else, there's some really like powerful just pictures throughout that
Hmm.
movie,
Yeah.
and
Which
both.
I was just gonna say, which sometimes I feel like, interestingly, is forgotten when talking about like film and TV is like the
Yeah.
composition of the actual like frame by frame imagery. Have you ever seen? Have you ever seen? I believe you pronounce his name Villeneuve, the director. Have you seen
Oh,
his film Arrival?
yes, I have.
Bro,
Arrival, very very good movie.
bro, dude, that
It's cool.
kills me. That
That
movie
is,
kills me. The storytelling is wild.
I
How they
think,
like kind
yeah,
of like with the
weave it all
timeline,
together. Yeah,
bro. It's so crazy.
I forget if
So yeah, that
That's one that
was
I wanted Colleen to see. So that might. I don't think she's seen it, so that might go back on the list.
well, and to me, like, there's something so I'll use the word like meaningful when it comes to like language and communication. Like often that's what I like pull from things is just
Mm-hmm.
like how people are communicating or like what's said or whatever. So a movie that dealt with that as like its core kind of thing.
Oh,
There were
just right up
so
your
oh my
alley.
god, it was like it was so good. So yeah, that was another one of, his films. So I'm basically saying that to say I'm looking forward to seeing Dune 2, so I'm happy to hear that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was very well done. So it's out there on. I think we watched it on HBO. So
Nice.
it's out there available. I'm sure you could rent it. But yeah, that wraps up the flavor of the week for this week, and that does bring us to the end of this week's episode. So yeah, as always, thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. It's been a fun one.
Tell your friends. New episodes after every race weekend. We've got a break here coming up, and then a triple header starting with, I believe, Barcelona, right? I think that's
Think
where
so.
we're at
Yeah.
next. So
Be
yeah, tell your
sick.
friends. New episodes after every race weekend. I'm your host, Justin. Thank you so much for joining us.
See you guys.
Peace out.